I'll never forget the sound of her acrylic nails tapping against my kitchen counter. Tap, 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 like a rattlesnake's warning before it strikes. "Evelyn," she said, not even bothering to call me Mom or Miss Evelyn like decent folks do down here in Georgia. Just my first name, flat and cold as January rain. "We need to talk about your living situation." My living situation. In the house I'd lived in for 42 years. The house where I'd raised my son, buried my husband, and planted every single rose bush in that front yard with my own 2 hands. She was standing in my kitchen, with her blonde hair pulled back so tight it looked like it hurt, wearing one of those expensive athleisure outfits that cost more than my monthly grocery bill. Her ring, the one my son Michael had gone into debt to buy her, caught the afternoon light streaming through the window above my sink. The same window I'd watched my boy play in the backyard through, back when he still called me Mama, and meant it. "Pack your bags," she continued, examining her manicured nails like she was discussing the weather. "This is our house now. Michael and I need our space to start our life together. I'm sure you understand." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I didn't let it show. Not yet. Not to her. After 67 years on this earth, I'd learned a thing or two about keeping my cards close to my chest. So I just looked at her, really looked at her, and said 5 words that would change everything. "I need to make a phone call." But to understand how we got to that moment, how my own son's fiancée could stand in my kitchen and try to throw me out of my own home, I need to take you back to when things were simpler. Back to before Amber Nicole Sutton walked into our lives like a hurricane in designer heels. My name is Evelyn Mae Thompson, and I'm here to tell you that it's never too late to remind people exactly who they're dealing with. Before we get into this, I want to ask you something. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt overlooked or underestimated because of your age, do me a favor and hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel, because Lord knows, we grandmas have stories to tell. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love knowing I'm not alone in this. And if you see that hype button pop up, give it a click. Help me reach as many people as possible with this message, because somebody out there needs to hear it. Now let me tell you how a Southern woman in her late 60s took back her life, her home, and her dignity. This is my story, and honey, it's a good one. I grew up in Valdosta, Georgia, the youngest of 5 children born to James and Ruth Calloway. Daddy worked at the paper mill, and Mama cleaned houses for the wealthy families on the north side of town. We didn't have much, but what we had was honest and earned through hard work and sweat. Mama used to say, "Evelyn Mae, you keep your word and your credit good, and you'll always have a place to stand." I carried those words with me my whole life. We lived in a small shotgun house on Cypress Street, where you could stand at the front door and see clear through to the back. In summer, that house was hot as Hades, and in winter we'd all huddle around the one gas heater in the living room. But it was ours, paid off by my daddy's calloused hands and my mama's sore knees. They taught us that home wasn't just 4 walls and a roof. It was security. It was legacy. It was the one thing nobody could take from you, if you played your cards right. I met my husband, Robert Thompson, at a church social in 1976. I was 20 years old, working as a secretary at the county clerk's office, and he was 23, fresh from a stint in the Army, and working at the John Deere dealership. He wasn't the most handsome man in the room, but he had kind eyes and a good laugh, and when he asked me to dance, his hands were gentle and respectful. We courted for 8 months before he proposed with a simple gold band he'd saved up for. Nothing fancy, but it meant everything. We got married in September of 1977 at the First Baptist Church, with my mama's homemade wedding cake and my sisters singing the Lord's Prayer. We didn't have money for a honeymoon, so we spent our wedding night in a little motel just outside of town, then came home to a rented duplex on the east side of Valdosta. It was cramped and the plumbing was questionable, but we were happy. We were building something together. Robert had dreams of owning his own home, not just renting from somebody else. He'd seen too many families get evicted when landlords decided to sell or raise the rent, and he was determined that wouldn't be us. So, we saved. We saved every extra penny we had. I took on typing jobs at night, and Robert worked overtime whenever it was offered. We ate beans and rice more nights than I can count, wore clothes till they had more patches than original fabric, and didn't go to the movies or out to eat for nearly 3 years. In 1980, we finally had enough for a down payment on a small house in Waycross, Georgia, about an hour east of where we'd started. It was a modest 3-bedroom ranch-style home on Gilmore Street, built in 1965, with yellow aluminum siding and brown shutters. It had a carport instead of a garage, a small front yard, and a bigger backyard that backed up to a wooded area. The kitchen was outdated even then, with avocado green appliances and linoleum flooring that had seen better days. But it was ours. Well, ours and the bank's. But we had the deed with our names on it, and that meant everything. I'll never forget the day we got the keys. July 15th, 1980. The hottest day of summer must have been 98 degrees in the shade. Robert carried me over that threshold like we were newlyweds all over again, both of us sweating and laughing and crying at the same time. That night, we didn't even have furniture yet. We slept on a blanket on the living room floor, looking up at the ceiling that belonged to us, in a house that belonged to us. Robert held my hand and said, "Evie, nobody can ever take this from us. This is our piece of America." 6 months later, I found out I was pregnant. We'd been trying for years, had almost given up hope, and then there he was, our miracle baby. Michael Robert Thompson was born on April 3rd, 1981, at the Waycross Regional Medical Center. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, with a full head of dark hair and lungs that could wake the dead. He was perfect, absolutely perfect. I took 6 weeks of maternity leave from my job at the insurance office, where I'd been working since we moved to Waycross. Then my mama came to help with Michael while I went back to work. Money was tight with the mortgage payment, and we needed both incomes to keep our heads above water. Robert had gotten a job as a service manager at a local automotive shop, and I was doing bookkeeping and filing. We weren't rich, not by a long shot, but we were making it work. Michael grew up in that house on Gilmore Street. He took his first steps in the living room, holding onto the coffee table Robert had built himself. He learned to ride his bike in the driveway, with Robert running alongside him until he got his balance. He climbed the oak tree in the backyard and broke his arm falling out of it when he was 9. Every inch of that house held memories of our boy growing up. Robert was a good father. He coached Michael's Little League team, taught him how to fish in the pond at General Coffee State Park, and spent countless evenings helping with homework at the kitchen table. He was patient and kind, the kind of daddy every boy deserves. Michael adored him, wanted to be just like him. They had a bond that made my heart swell every time I saw them together. We were happy, simple, working class, happy. We went to church on Sundays at Waycross First United Methodist, had Friday night fish fries with neighbors, and spent summer evenings on the front porch with sweet tea and the sound of cicadas. Life wasn't fancy, but it was good. It was ours. Then, in the fall of 2003, everything changed. Robert had been complaining of being tired, short of breath. I nagged him to go to the doctor, but you know how men are. Stubborn as mules. Finally, I made the appointment myself and drove him there. They found a mass on his lung, stage 4 lung cancer. He'd never smoked a day in his life, but sometimes, the doctor said, it just happens. Bad luck, wrong place, wrong time. He fought for 8 months. 8 months of chemotherapy that made him so sick, he couldn't keep anything down. 8 months of watching the strongest man I'd ever known waste away to nothing. 8 months of trying to be strong for him, and for Michael, who was 22, and watching his hero die. Robert passed away on June 17th, 2004, at home in our bedroom, with me holding his hand and Michael sitting at the foot of the bed. He was 51 years old, The life insurance policy paid off the remaining mortgage on the house. That was Robert's final gift to me, making sure I'd never lose our home. The house was mine, free and clear. No more mortgage payments, just property taxes and maintenance. Robert had planned it that way, had made sure the policy was big enough to cover the balance. Nobody's gonna put my Evie out on the street, he'd told the insurance agent when we took out the policy years earlier. Losing Robert nearly broke me. I won't lie about that. There were days I couldn't get out of bed, days where breathing felt like too much effort. But I had Michael, and Michael needed me. He was grieving too, and we held each other up as best we could. He'd graduated from South Georgia College with an associate degree in business and was working at the regional bank, doing well for himself. He still lived at home. Plenty of young people did, especially in a small town where rent was expensive and good jobs were scarce. For the next 15 years, it was just the two of us in that house, Michael and me, keeping Robert's memory alive. We kept his workshop in the garage exactly as he'd left it, his tools hanging on the pegboard in the same spots. I kept his favorite chair in the living room, the brown lazy boy with the worn armrests. Sometimes I'd still find myself cooking enough dinner for 3 before I remembered. Michael was a good son. He helped with yard work, fixed things around the house when they broke, and made sure I had everything I needed. He gave me part of his paycheck each month to help with utilities and groceries, even though I told him the house was paid off and I was doing fine on my widow's benefits and my part-time job at the church office. He insisted. "Mama," he'd say, "you took care of me my whole life. Let me help take care of you now." We fell into a comfortable routine. I'd make breakfast before he left for work, and we'd have dinner together most nights. Weekends, he'd do projects around the house, fixing the leaky faucet in the bathroom, painting the shutters, cleaning out the gutters. We'd watch Braves games together on TV, and he'd tell me about his day at the bank, about the customers he helped and the loans he processed. He dated here and there over the years, but nothing serious. A girl named Jessica in his mid-20s who moved to Atlanta for a better job. A woman named Candace he met at church who turned out to be more interested in his potential than in him. Each time a relationship ended, he'd be a little sad for a while, then bounce back. "I'm just waiting for the right one, Mama," he'd tell me. "When I find her, you'll know." The first signs of change came in early 2019. Michael, who had just turned 38, started spending more time on his phone. He'd be grinning at the screen during dinner, typing away instead of talking to me. When I'd ask who he was texting, he'd just say, "A friend from work," and change the subject. I didn't push. My boy was a grown man, entitled to his privacy. Then, in March of 2019, he told me he'd met someone special. Her name was Amber. She was 32, and she'd just started working at the bank as a personal banker. He showed me her picture on his phone. A pretty blonde woman with a big smile and perfectly styled hair. She looked polished, professional, different from the girls he usually dated who were more the jeans and ponytail type. "I really like her, Mama," he said, and I could see it in his eyes. He was smitten. "She's smart and ambitious. She's got big dreams. I think she could be the one." I was happy for him. Truly I was. Every mother wants to see her son find love, find someone to share his life with. I just wish I'd paid more attention to what he didn't say. In that moment, he didn't say she was kind. He didn't say she was funny. He didn't say she made him laugh or that she cared about other people. He said she was ambitious and had big dreams. In hindsight, that should have been my first clue. They started dating officially in April. For the first few months, I barely saw her. Michael would go out to meet her after work or on weekends, but he didn't bring her around the house much. When I asked about it, he said she was busy with work and settling into her new apartment in Brunswick, about 20 minutes away. I understood, or at least, I tried to. The first time I met Amber Nicole Sutton was in July of 2019, at a cookout Michael organized in our backyard for the 4th of July. He'd invited some of his friends from work, some neighbors, and, of course, Amber. I spent 2 days preparing, making my famous potato salad, deviled eggs, baked beans, and a chocolate cake. I wanted everything to be perfect for meeting the woman my son was falling in love with. She arrived in a white BMW sedan, wearing white capri pants and a red halter top that showed more skin than I thought was appropriate for a family gathering. But I reminded myself that styles had changed since I was young. She had designer sunglasses perched on her head and carried an expensive-looking purse. When she got out of the car, I noticed her shoes, red heels that sank into my lawn with every step. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, extending her hand instead of going in for a hug like most Southern girls would. Her handshake was firm, businesslike. "It's so nice to finally meet you. Michael talks about you all the time. Call me Evelyn, honey," I said, trying to warm up to her. "Or Miss Evie, if you prefer. We're not formal around here." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Evelyn, it is." Throughout that afternoon, I watched her. I couldn't help it. That's what mothers do. She didn't offer to help with anything, just sat in one of the lawn chairs with her phone, occasionally getting up to take selfies with Michael. She barely touched the food I'd spent days making, saying she was watching her carbs. When my neighbor Martha tried to make conversation with her about growing up in Georgia, Amber mentioned she was originally from Atlanta and had only taken the job in Brunswick as a stepping stone to something bigger. The thing that bothered me most, though, was how she talked to Michael. She'd correct him in front of people, saying things like, "Actually, babe, that's not quite right," or, "Michael, that's not how you tell that story." She'd touch his arm when she wanted his attention, but it wasn't affectionate. It was controlling, like a mother correcting a child. And Michael, my confident, capable son, seemed to shrink a little around her. He was eager to please her, quick to agree with whatever she said. After everyone left and we were cleaning up, I tried to talk to him about it. Not confrontational, just gentle questions. "She seems nice, honey. Very driven." "She is," he said enthusiastically, putting away lawn chairs. "She's amazing, Mama. She's got a 5-year plan for her career, investment strategies, everything mapped out. She's not like other women I've dated. She knows what she wants." "What does she want?" I asked, scraping paper plates into the trash bag. "Success," he said simply. "She wants to move up in the banking world, eventually get into wealth management or become a branch manager. She's got goals." "That's good," I said carefully. "But what about y'all's relationship? What are her goals there?" He paused and I saw something flicker across his face. Uncertainty, maybe. But then he smiled. "She cares about me, Mama. She pushes me to be better. She thinks I could do more at the bank, move up to a management position. She believes in me." I wanted to say that I believed in him too, that I always had, and I didn't need to push or correct him to show it. But I held my tongue. The last thing I wanted was to be the mother who criticized his girlfriend and pushed him away. So I just hugged him and said, "As long as you're happy, baby, that's all that matters." But even then, something in my gut told me this woman was going to be trouble. Mothers know these things. We feel it in our bones. Over the next year, Michael and Amber's relationship progressed quickly. By October of 2019, just 6 months after they'd started dating, she'd left her apartment in Brunswick and moved into his apartment closer to Waycross. I didn't see as much of Michael during this time. He was wrapped up in his new relationship, which I understood. That's what happens when you're in love. But when I did see him, usually at church on Sundays or when he stopped by for dinner once a week, I noticed changes. He dressed differently now. Gone were his comfortable jeans and t-shirts, replaced by pressed khakis and button-down shirts, even on weekends. Amber's influence, he said. She thought he should dress for the job he wanted, not the job he had. He'd stopped watching Braves games because Amber thought sports were a waste of time. He'd joined a gym because Amber said he was getting soft around the middle. He'd even changed his hair, styled it differently with some kind of gel or product. I watched my son slowly disappear into whatever version of himself Amber wanted him to be, and it broke my heart a little more each day. But I kept quiet. I smiled and nodded and told him how nice he looked, how proud I was of him getting in shape. What else could I do? He was 39 years old, a grown man. He had to make his own choices, even if I didn't agree with them. The changes weren't just physical. He started talking differently, too, using business jargon and corporate speak that didn't sound like him at all. Leveraging opportunities, maximizing potential, strategic networking. It was like he'd swallowed a business textbook and was regurgitating it. The easy, warm way he used to talk, full of southern expressions and friendly chattiness, was fading away, replaced by this polished corporate version of my son that I barely recognized. In February of 2020, right before the whole world shut down with COVID, Michael and Amber got engaged. He told me over the phone, not even in person. Mama, I asked Amber to marry me, and she said yes. He sounded happy, excited. I tried to match his enthusiasm, told him congratulations, told him I was thrilled for him. But when I hung up the phone, I sat in my living room and cried. Not tears of joy, but tears of loss. I felt like I was losing my son. The pandemic delayed their wedding plans, which gave them more time to save, Michael said. He and Amber both kept working. The bank was considered essential business, while the world locked down around us. During those long isolated months, I barely saw Michael. Amber was worried about him bringing COVID home, so he'd just call me once a week to check in. No more Sunday dinners. No more stopping by to fix things around the house. Just brief phone calls where he'd ask if I was okay, if I needed anything, then tell me he had to go, because Amber needed him for something. I felt abandoned, alone. I was 64 years old, living by myself in a house full of memories, in the middle of a pandemic, with my only child prioritizing his fiancée's fears over his mother's loneliness. But I understood. Love makes you do things, makes you prioritize your partner. That's natural. That's what you're supposed to do. I just wished she'd make a little room in his life for me, too. By the summer of 2020, Amber started bringing up the idea of them moving in with me, not framing it as moving in, exactly, but as helping out. Michael's lease was up, she mentioned, during one of the rare masked and socially distanced visits they made to my house. It seemed silly to renew when I had all this space in my house. Wouldn't it make sense for them to stay with me while they planned the wedding and saved money? They could pay me rent, help with expenses. It would be beneficial for everyone. I didn't want to do it. Every fiber of my being resisted the idea. This was my home, my sanctuary, the place Robert and I had built our life together. The thought of sharing it with Amber made my skin crawl. But Michael was looking at me with those hopeful eyes, the same eyes he'd had as a little boy, when he wanted something, and I heard Robert's voice in my head. Take care of our boy, Evie. Always take care of our boy. So I said yes. God forgive me. I said yes. They moved in at the end of August 2020. What Amber had called staying with me quickly turned into something else entirely. Within the first week, she'd rearranged my living room furniture without asking, saying it had better flow her way. She took over the master bedroom, the bedroom I'd shared with Robert, the bedroom where he'd died, saying she and Michael needed more space than my smaller bedroom could provide. She put me in the guest bedroom, the smallest room in the house. It just makes sense, Evelyn, she said when I hesitated at the bedroom doorway, looking at the bed where I'd slept for decades. Michael and I need the closet space, and you don't have that many clothes anyway. You'll be more comfortable in the smaller room. Less to clean. I moved my things. My clothes, my books, the framed photos of Robert that had sat on my nightstand. I put them all in the guest room and tried not to feel like a guest in my own home. Michael helped me move, apologizing with his eyes even though his mouth said nothing. It's just temporary, Mama, he whispered when Amber was out of the room. Just until we can afford our own place after the wedding. The next change was the kitchen. Amber didn't like my dishes, said they were outdated and mismatched. She bought new ones, sleek white plates from Target, and put mine in the garage. She didn't like my pots and pans either. Said they were too old and probably not healthy to cook with. She bought new nonstick sets and donated my cast iron skillets to Goodwill without asking. Those skillets had belonged to my mother. I'd cooked thousands of meals in them, and she gave them away like they were nothing. She took over cooking too, saying I needed a break after all these years. But it wasn't a break. It was exile. She'd be in there with her meal prep containers and her calorie counting apps, making bland chicken and steamed vegetables. No seasoning, no flavor. Nothing like the Sunday pot roasts and fried chicken I used to make. When I tried to help, she'd shoo me away. "I've got it, Evelyn. You just relax." But I didn't want to relax. I wanted to cook in my own kitchen. I wanted to feel useful, feel needed, feel like this was still my home. Instead, I felt like I was in the way, a relic from another time, something to be managed and minimized. The changes kept coming, each one small enough that it seemed petty to complain about, but together they added up to a complete takeover of my life. Amber changed the thermostat setting because she ran hot and didn't like the house above 70 degrees. I was cold all the time, wearing sweaters in my own home in the Georgia summer, because the air conditioning was always blasting. She changed my cable package to save money, getting rid of the channels I actually watched. She rearranged my kitchen cabinets, putting things in places that didn't make sense to me, so I couldn't find anything without asking her where it was. She started doing my grocery shopping, saying it was easier if she just did everything in one trip. But she'd come back with almond milk instead of regular milk, gluten-free bread instead of the wheat bread I liked, organic vegetables that tasted like cardboard. When I asked her to get my usual items, she'd say they were bad for me or not worth the money. I was 64 years old, and someone was telling me what I could and couldn't eat in my own home. The worst part was watching Michael go along with all of it. He saw what was happening. I know he did. But he never spoke up. When I'd try to talk to him about it privately, he'd say things like, "She's just trying to help, Mama," or "She knows a lot about health and wellness," or "Try to be more flexible." We're all adjusting here. But I was the only one adjusting. They were taking over, and I was letting them because I didn't want to lose my son. I didn't want to be the bitter mother-in-law who couldn't get along with her son's fiancée. So I swallowed my complaints, bit my tongue, and tried to make myself smaller and smaller in my own home. By early 2021, I was living like a ghost in my own house. I spent most of my time in my little bedroom, the one that used to be the guest room, only coming out for meals or when I had to. I'd hear Amber and Michael talking in the living room, my living room, making plans for their future. They'd set a wedding date for November 2021 and were planning a big event at some fancy venue in Savannah, over an hour away. I wasn't involved in any of the planning. Amber would occasionally tell me what they'd decided, the color scheme, the menu, the DJ. But she never asked my opinion or input. I'd offered to help pay for the wedding, thinking maybe it would give me a role, make me feel included. I had some money saved, about $15,000 that Robert's life insurance had left me after paying off the house. It wasn't much, but I wanted to contribute to my only son's wedding. Amber's response was polite but dismissive. "That's sweet, Evelyn, but we've got it covered. Save your money. You'll need it for your retirement." My retirement? Like I was some old lady who needed to be managed. I was 65, not 90. I still worked part-time at the church office, still drove, still had my faculties. But to Amber, I was already obsolete, something to be tolerated and managed until they could figure out what to do with me. The subtle signs of what was really going on started becoming clearer around this time. I'd notice Amber and Michael having whispered conversations that would stop the moment I entered a room. I'd see her looking around the house with this calculating expression, like she was measuring it for something. She'd make comments about property values in the area, about how much houses in our neighborhood were selling for. "This is actually a pretty valuable lot," she'd say. "Good location, decent size. In a hot market, this could go for $250, maybe $275. One evening in March, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. I'd come out of my room to get a glass of water and heard Amber's voice, low and intense. "Michael, we've been saving, but it's not enough for a down payment on the kind of house I want. We need to think strategically here." "I know, babe," Michael said. "We're doing the best we can." "Are we, though?" she pressed. "We're paying rent to your mother when we could be investing in our own property. It doesn't make financial sense." "Mama needs the help with expenses," Michael said, and I felt a surge of gratitude that he was defending me, however weakly. "Does she?" Amber's voice was skeptical. "She's got Social Security. She's got that part-time job, and this house is paid off. What expenses does she really have?" I walked away before I could hear more, my heart pounding. They were paying me $300 a month, which barely covered the increase in utilities from having 2 extra people in the house. I wasn't making money off them. If anything, I was losing money feeding them and accommodating their presence. But that conversation stuck with me. The way Amber had talked about the house, like it was an investment, a commodity, like it wasn't a home where a family had lived and loved and grieved. It was just square footage and property value to her. More red flags appeared as spring turned to summer. Amber started making changes to the house's exterior without consulting me. She had the yellow siding pressure washed, which was nice. But then she hired a company to paint the shutters without asking what color I wanted. They went from brown to gray, which she said was more modern and would increase curb appeal. When I protested that I liked the brown, she patted my arm like I was a child. "Trust me, Evelyn. Gray is what buyers are looking for these days." Buyers? Why was she talking about buyers? This wasn't for sale. She had landscapers come and rip out half my flower beds, replacing them with low-maintenance shrubs and mulch. "Your roses were overgrown and high maintenance," she explained when I came home from church to find my carefully tended rose bushes, the ones I'd planted with Robert, the ones I'd nurtured for decades, piled in a heap by the curb for trash pickup. "These boxwoods will look cleaner and won't need constant care." I cried over those roses. Actually cried, standing in my front yard, looking at the thorny canes and withered blooms in the trash pile. Each one of those bushes had a memory attached. The peace rose Robert gave me for our 10th anniversary. The Mr. Lincoln I planted the year Michael was born. The double delight we put in the year Robert died, because the pink and red blooms reminded me that joy and sorrow could exist together. Gone. All gone. Replaced with generic shrubs that Amber picked out at Home Depot. When I confronted her about it, she looked genuinely confused by my tears. "They're just plants, Evelyn. They'll grow back. Besides, the house looks so much better now. You'll thank me when you see how much easier it is to maintain." But they weren't just plants. They were Robert. They were my marriage. They were the proof that I'd built a life here, and she'd thrown them away like garbage. That was when I started to realize that Amber didn't just want to live in my house, temporarily. She wanted to own it. She wanted it to be hers, and she was slowly erasing me from it, one piece at a time. The wedding happened in November 2021, a lavish affair at a resort in Savannah that must have cost $30,000. I wore a dress I bought at Belk, cornflower blue with a lace jacket. Nothing fancy but appropriate for the mother of the groom. I sat in the front row during the ceremony, watching my son marry this woman who had systematically taken over every aspect of our lives. During the reception, people kept asking me if I was excited to have a daughter-in-law. I smiled and said all the right things. "Oh yes, they're wonderful together. I'm so happy for them. She's exactly what Michael needs." Lies. All of it. But what else was I supposed to say? The truth. That I felt like I was losing my son. That I suspected his new wife was planning something that didn't include me. That would make me sound like a bitter old woman who couldn't let go. Amber looked beautiful that day. I'll give her that. Her wedding dress probably cost as much as a used car. All lace and beading and a train that went on forever. She'd hired a professional makeup artist and hairstylist. Everything was documented by an expensive photographer and videographer. It was the kind of wedding I could never have afforded, the kind my mama would have called putting on airs. But it was what Amber wanted, and Michael gave her everything she wanted. During the father-son dance, since Robert wasn't there, Michael danced with me. 3 minutes of swaying to Wind Beneath My Wings. While everyone watched, he held me close and whispered, "Thanks for everything, Mama. I know this hasn't been easy, having us in the house, but I promise, things are going to get better. We're saving up. We'll have our own place soon." I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to believe him. But something in my gut told me that soon was never going to come. That they were settled in my house and they weren't planning on leaving. After the wedding, Amber started referring to the house as ours. Not your house or the house we're staying in, but our house. She'd tell people, "We live in Waycross, in our house on Gilmore Street." When I'd correct her, "It's my house, actually," she'd laugh like I'd told a joke. "Of course, Evelyn. I just meant our home, where we live as a family." But it wasn't just semantics. In January 2022, I got a piece of mail from the county tax assessor's office. It was addressed to me, Evelyn M. Thompson. But when I opened it, I found something strange. There was a form inside, a homestead exemption application, that had been filled out and submitted months earlier. My signature was on it, but I didn't remember signing it. The handwriting looked like mine, but something about it was off. The letters were too neat, too careful. I took it to Michael and asked him about it. "Did you help me fill this out? I don't remember doing this." He looked uncomfortable. "Oh, yeah. Amber said you mentioned wanting to apply for the homestead exemption to lower your property taxes. So she helped you fill out the paperwork a few months ago. Don't you remember?" I didn't remember, because it never happened. I would never have forgotten something like that. But I was 65, and maybe my memory wasn't what it used to be. Maybe I had said something and forgotten. The doubt crept in, insidious and undermining. Was I losing my mind? Looking back now, I know what happened. Amber had forged my signature. She'd practiced my handwriting and filled out forms without my knowledge. But at the time, I questioned myself. I doubted my own memory. And that's exactly what she wanted. More strange things started happening. Bills would go missing, then turn up days later in places I didn't put them. I'd find documents in my room that I didn't remember bringing there. Homeowners insurance paperwork, property deeds, bank statements. When I'd ask Michael or Amber about it, they'd suggest I was getting forgetful. "It's normal at your age, Evelyn," Amber would say with a sympathetic smile. "Maybe we should think about setting up a filing system to help you keep track of things." She was gaslighting me, making me doubt my own mind, positioning herself as the organized, capable one, while painting me as the confused, declining, elderly woman who couldn't manage her own affairs. In March 2022, Amber suggested she should be added to my bank accounts, just in case something happened to me. What if you fell and couldn't get to the bank? What if there was an emergency? It would just be smart to have someone else on the account who could help you. Michael agreed it made sense. "Just as a backup, Mama. For peace of mind." I refused. Something about it felt wrong. Felt like giving up control of the last thing that was truly mine. Amber smiled and said she understood, but I saw the flash of anger in her eyes before she hid it. She wasn't used to hearing no. That was the beginning of the end of any pretense of friendliness between us. After I refused to add her to my bank accounts, Amber's mask started slipping. She was less careful about hiding her contempt for me. She'd roll her eyes when I talked. She'd interrupt me mid-sentence. She'd make little comments about my clothes being outdated, my hair needing color, my housekeeping not meeting her standards. "The bathroom wasn't cleaned properly, Evelyn," she'd say, running her finger along the edge of the sink. "There's soap scum here." Maybe you could help cook dinner once in a while, she'd suggest. Michael says you used to be a good cook, though I suppose you're probably too tired these days. Do you really need to watch TV so loud? Some of us are trying to work in here. Each comment was a small cut, barely noticeable on its own, but together they bled me dry. I was being systematically diminished in my own home, made to feel useless, burdensome, in the way. Michael saw it happening, I know he did, but he was caught between loyalty to me and desire to please his new wife, and Amber was good at playing the victim when he tried to intervene. She'd cry, say I didn't like her, that she was just trying to help and I was unappreciative. She'd make him feel guilty for defending me. Slowly, imperceptibly, she was turning my son against me. By summer of 2022, I was walking on eggshells in my own home. I'd stay in my room most of the time, coming out only when necessary. I'd eat my meals quickly and retreat. I'd do my own laundry, clean only my own spaces, try to be invisible. I was trying to survive in the house my husband and I had bought, the house where I'd raised my son, the house that was supposed to be mine, until I died. September 2022 was when things came to a head. I'd just turned 66 years old a few months earlier, and I was feeling every one of those years. The stress of living in that hostile environment was wearing on me. I wasn't sleeping well. I wasn't eating well. I'd stopped going to my church functions because Amber would make comments about me always being gone, about me not caring about spending time with the family. One afternoon in mid-September, I overheard another conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. I'd come home early from my part-time job at the church. We'd finished inventory earlier than expected, and when I walked in the front door, I heard voices in the kitchen. Loud voices. Amber and Michael were arguing, which was unusual. They never fought in front of me. I should have announced myself, should have called out that I was home. But something made me stop in the hallway, listening. "Not going to live forever," Amber was saying. "We need to think about this pragmatically, Michael. What happens when she gets too old to live alone? Are we supposed to take care of her? For how many years?" "She's my mother, Amber." Michael's voice sounded tired, defeated. "What am I supposed to do? Put her in a nursing home?" "Why not?" Amber shot back. "That's what they're for. People who need care. We could sell this house, use the money for her care, and finally get a place of our own." My heart stopped. Sell this house? Use the money for my care, like I was already incompetent, already needing to be institutionalized. "We can't sell her house," Michael said. "It's hers. It's in her name." There was a long pause. Then Amber's voice, lower now, more calculating. "Is it, though? We should check the deed. After all the work we've put into this place, after all the improvements we've made, after paying rent all this time, there might be grounds for claiming partial ownership, or at least for reimbursement." "That's not how it works." "Michael," Amber cut him off, "your mother is 66 years old. She's showing signs of decline, memory issues, confusion about paperwork. At some point, someone's going to have to take over her affairs. Wouldn't it be better if it was family? If it was us?" I didn't hear Michael's response because I backed out of the hallway as quietly as I'd entered, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the doorknob. I stood outside on my own front porch, in front of my own house, and realized with absolute clarity what was happening. Amber wanted my house. She'd been positioning herself for over 2 years now, making improvements, establishing residence, undermining my competency. She was building a case to either take the house from me outright or have me declared incompetent so she and Michael could control my assets. And my son, God help him, was too caught up in pleasing his wife to see that he was betraying his own mother. I drove around for 2 hours that day, just driving through Waycross and the surrounding areas, trying to calm down, trying to think. I ended up at the cemetery where Robert was buried. I sat next to his grave and talked to him, something I hadn't done in years. "I don't know what to do, Bobby," I said, using the nickname I'd called him when we were young. "Our boy is lost. That woman has him so twisted around that he can't see straight. And I'm about to lose everything. Our house, our son, everything we built. I need you to tell me what to do." The wind rustled through the oak trees overhead, and I swear I felt Robert's presence. I heard his voice in my head as clear as day. "Fight, Evie. You've never backed down from anything in your life. Don't start now. Protect what's yours." I dried my eyes, stood up, and drove to the Waycross Regional Library. I spent the next 3 hours researching property law in Georgia, tenant rights, elder abuse, and legal protection of assets. I printed out pages and pages of information, spent $2 in printing fees, and left that library with a plan forming in my mind. If Amber wanted a fight, I'd give her one, but I'd be smart about it. Methodical. I'd learned from watching her operate for the past 2 years. The confrontation happened on October 15th, 2022, a Tuesday afternoon. I'd been planning for it, preparing, gathering what I needed. I'd made appointments with my lawyer, checked my bank accounts, verified property records at the county clerk's office. Everything was in order. Everything was still mine, but I hadn't let Amber know I knew what she was planning. I'd spent the morning at an appointment in Brunswick, one I'd been careful not to tell either Michael or Amber about. When I came home around 3 in the afternoon, Amber was there alone. Michael was at work. She was sitting at my kitchen table, the table Robert had bought at a yard sale 40 years ago, and refinished himself, with papers spread out in front of her. She looked up when I walked in, and for just a second, before she composed herself, I saw guilt flash across her face. "Evelyn," she said, gathering up the papers quickly. "You're home early." "I live here," I said simply, setting my purse down on the counter. "What are those papers?" "Just some things for Michael and me. Nothing you need to worry about." But I'd caught a glimpse of the letterhead before she stacked them. Henderson and Associates, attorneys at law. They were legal documents. "Let me see them," I said, holding out my hand. "I don't think—" "Let me see them." My voice was harder now. I wasn't asking. I was telling. Amber's eyes narrowed, and just like that, the mask came completely off. No more pretending, no more fake politeness. "Fine. You want to know? These are documents establishing Michael's claim to this property, based on his years of residence and financial contribution. We've been paying you rent, we've made substantial improvements to the property, and we've established residency. In Georgia, that gives us certain rights." My heart was pounding, but my voice stayed steady. "This house is in my name. The deed is in my name. You have no claim to it. Don't we?" She stood up, facing me across the kitchen. She was taller than me, younger, more physically imposing, and she knew it. "You're 66 years old, Evelyn. You're showing signs of cognitive decline. You forget conversations. You misplace important documents. You need help managing your affairs. At some point, someone is going to have to take over. It might as well be family." "I'm not declining," I said, "and you know it. You've been gaslighting me, trying to make me doubt myself, but I see what you're doing." She laughed, actually laughed. "You think anyone would believe you over me? Over us? Michael would testify that you've been struggling, that you need help, that you asked us to stay here because you couldn't manage on your own. That's a lie, is it?" She stepped closer and I could smell her perfume, something expensive and cloying. "You're old, Evelyn. You're alone. You're vulnerable. And you're in the way of what Michael and I are trying to build. So here's what's going to happen." She pulled out a chair and sat back down, like she was the queen holding court. "Michael and I need this house. We've earned it, frankly, putting up with you for the past 2 years. So you have 2 options. Option 1, you sign over the house to Michael now, and we let you live here as long as you're able to care for yourself. When you can't, we'll find you a nice assisted living facility." "And option 2? I asked, though I already knew. "Option 2, we start legal proceedings to have you declared incompetent. We present evidence of your decline, and we have plenty of it. Trust me. Michael testifies about your memory issues, your confusion. We get a judge to appoint Michael as your conservator. He takes over your finances, your property, all of it. Then we sell this house, use the proceeds for your care, and buy a place of our own. Either way, Evelyn, this house becomes ours. The only question is whether you want to make this easy or hard. The threat hung in the air between us. This was it. This was the moment she'd been building toward for 2 years, and she thought she'd won. She actually thought I'd roll over and give her what she wanted. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a woman who'd spent her whole life taking shortcuts, using people, manipulating situations to her advantage. She'd probably been doing it since she was a teenager. Charm and manipulation in equal measure, always getting what she wanted. She'd looked at my son and seen a mark, a decent, stable man with a comfortable life, and a mother who owned a house outright. She'd played him expertly, and now she was going in for the kill. But she'd made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated me. She'd seen an elderly widow and assumed I was weak, stupid, easy to control. She hadn't considered that I'd been managing my own affairs since Robert died, that I'd raised a child alone, balanced budgets, made decisions, survived grief that would have broken lesser people. She'd looked at my age and my kindness and mistaken them for incompetence. "Evelyn," she said, her voice taking on that patronizing tone again. "I know this is hard to hear, but you need to face reality. You're not getting any younger. This house is too much for you to manage alone. Michael and I, we're the future. You're the past. And it's time for you to step aside and let us take over." The words hung in the air. The past. That's what I was to her. An obstacle to be removed. And in that moment, standing in the kitchen of the house I'd lived in for 42 years, I made my decision. I walked over to my purse, pulled out my cell phone, and made a call, while Amber watched me with growing confusion. "Hello," I said when someone answered. "I need to make a phone call." Actually, let me back up a moment. When I said, "I need to make a phone call," I wasn't talking to the person on the other end of the line yet. I was talking to Amber, letting her know exactly what I was about to do. And the look on her face, the confusion turning to concern, it was almost worth everything she'd put me through. I dialed the number I'd programmed into my phone that morning, the one I'd gotten from my lawyer's office. It rang twice before a professional voice answered. "Heritage Bank, Fraud Prevention Department. This is Monica speaking. How can I help you?" "Yes, hello," I said, keeping my eyes locked on Amber's face. "My name is Evelyn Mae Thompson. I'm calling to report suspected fraud on my accounts and potential identity theft." Amber's face went white. Actually white. The blood just drained right out of it. "Ma'am, I can help you with that," Monica said. "Can you verify your account information?" I rattled off my account numbers, the ones I'd memorized years ago, while Amber stood frozen in my kitchen. "I need to report that someone has been attempting to access my accounts without authorization. I believe they may have forged documents using my signature. I also need to put a fraud alert on all my accounts and remove any secondary account holders that may have been added without my explicit written consent." "I can certainly help you with that, Mrs. Thompson. Let me pull up your accounts." There was a pause and I heard typing. Amber was slowly sitting back down in her chair, like her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. Good. Let her feel what it's like to have the ground shift under her feet. "Mrs. Thompson, I show that there was an attempt to add a secondary account holder to your checking and savings accounts about 6 weeks ago. But it was flagged by our system because the signature didn't quite match our records. The request was denied, and we sent you a letter about it. Did you receive that letter?" 6 weeks ago, right around the time Amber had suggested being added to my accounts. When I'd refused, she must have tried to do it anyway. "I never received that letter," I said, watching Amber. "I suspect it was intercepted." "I see. Well, we'll definitely put a fraud alert on all your accounts immediately. And Mrs. Thompson, given what you're reporting, I recommend you come into the branch as soon as possible to review all your accounts, and file a formal fraud report. We may need to involve local authorities if there's evidence of forgery or identity theft. I'll be there first thing tomorrow morning, I said. Thank you, Monica. I hung up and set my phone down on the counter. Amber was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. You tried to add yourself to my bank accounts, I said quietly. Even after I told you no, you forged my signature. That's not... She was stammering now, the polished veneer completely cracked. It was a misunderstanding. I was just trying to help. Help yourself, you mean? I walked over to the kitchen table and picked up the legal documents she'd been looking at. And you've been consulting with lawyers about taking my house, about having me declared incompetent. Michael agreed. Did he? I asked. Or did you tell him it was for my own good? Did you manipulate my son the same way you've been manipulating everything else? She stood up abruptly, and for a moment I thought she might actually try to physically intimidate me. But I didn't back down. I'd spent 2 years shrinking myself, making myself small, trying not to be a burden. I was done with that. You don't know what you're doing, Evelyn, she said, her voice low and dangerous. If you make trouble, if you try to cause problems for me and Michael, you'll lose him. He'll choose me. He's my husband. Maybe, I said, but this is my house, and you're going to leave it. She laughed, but it sounded forced. I'm not going anywhere. Michael lives here. I live here. We're married. You can't just kick us out. Actually, I can. I picked up my phone again. I've been doing some research, Amber. Georgia is very clear about property rights. This house is in my name, solely in my name. You and Michael are tenants at will, meaning I can terminate your tenancy with 60 days written notice. I don't even need a reason. It's my property, and I have the right to determine who lives here. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She hadn't expected this, hadn't expected me to know my rights, to have consulted a lawyer, to fight back. Now, you're going to pack your things, I continued, my voice steady and calm. You're going to leave this house today, not in 60 days. Today. Because if you don't, I'm going to call the police and file a report about the attempted fraud, the forged signatures, and the fact that you're making threats against the legal owner of this property. Michael can stay if he wants, I said, and my voice cracked just a little on my son's name. But you need to go. Now. We stood there, locked in a stare-down, for what felt like an hour but was probably only 30 seconds. I could see her calculating, trying to figure out if I was bluffing, trying to determine if she could still manipulate the situation. But whatever she saw in my face must have convinced her I was serious. Fine, she spat. I'll go. But when Michael gets home, when he finds out what you've done, he's going to choose me. And you're going to end up alone in this house, a bitter old woman with nobody who cares about her. The words were meant to hurt, and they did. But I didn't let her see it. Maybe, I said again, but at least it'll be my house. She stormed out of the kitchen, and I heard her banging around in the master bedroom, throwing things into suitcases. I stood in the kitchen, my hands shaking now that the confrontation was over, and waited. 30 minutes later, she came out with 2 suitcases and her designer purse. I hope you're happy, she said from the doorway. I'm not, I told her honestly, but I will be. She slammed the door on her way out. I watched through the window as she threw her suitcases in her BMW and peeled out of the driveway, like the house was on fire. Then I sat down at the kitchen table, my kitchen table, and cried. Not sad tears, but tears of release, tears of relief, tears of anger for everything she'd done and everything I'd let her do for 2 years. Then I pulled myself together, washed my face, and started making the phone calls I needed to make. The first call was to my lawyer, Davis Henderson. He was a member of my church, had handled Robert's estate when he passed, and I'd met with him 3 days earlier to discuss my situation. He'd been the one who'd told me about my rights as a property owner, who'd looked up the case law, who'd given me the number for the bank's fraud department. Davis, "It's Evelyn Thompson," I said when he answered. "I just confronted Amber, and she's left the house, but I need to know what happens next." "Did you threaten her in any way?" he asked, immediately in lawyer mode. "No. I told her she needed to leave, and I mentioned the attempted fraud on my bank accounts. I said if she didn't leave voluntarily, I'd call the police. That's all?" "Good. That's within your rights. Now, Michael is a different situation. He's your son, and you need to think carefully about how you want to handle this." "I know. I'd been thinking about nothing else for days. Can I legally ask him to leave too?" "You can. He's a tenant, same as his wife. But Evelyn, that's your son. Are you sure that's what you want?" "I wasn't sure. That was the problem. What if I give him a choice? He can stay, but she can't come back. Is that enforceable?" "It's your house. You can set whatever conditions you want for who lives there, but enforcing it might be tricky if he lets her in. You might want to consider having him sign something, acknowledging the terms." We talked for another 20 minutes about my options, about the fraud report I'd need to file, about protecting myself legally. Davis offered to draft a formal letter to both Michael and Amber, terminating their tenancy and setting clear boundaries. I told him I'd think about it, that I wanted to talk to Michael first. After I hung up with Davis, I called the bank back and made an appointment for 9 the next morning to review all my accounts and file a formal fraud report. Then I called the county clerk's office and verified that my property deed was still recorded solely in my name, with no liens or claims against it. It was. Everything was still mine, at least on paper. The hard part was waiting for Michael to come home. He walked in around 6:30, his usual time. I was sitting in the living room in Robert's old lazy boy that Amber had tried to throw out twice. I'd been rehearsing what to say, but when I saw my boy's face, all the words left me. "Hey, Mama," he said, setting his briefcase down by the door. "What's for dinner? Is Amber cooking or should we order something?" "Amber's gone," I said simply. He froze. "Gone? What do you mean gone?" "I mean she packed her bags and left. She's not living here anymore." His face went through about 5 different expressions in the span of 3 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, shock, and then anger. "What did you do?" "What did I do?" I stood up, and I felt Robert's strength flowing through me. "Your wife tried to steal my house, Michael. She tried to add herself to my bank accounts without permission, forged my signature. She's been consulting with lawyers about having me declared incompetent, so you two could take over my property. So I told her to leave." "That's not—" "She wouldn't—" He was shaking his head, pulling out his phone. "I need to call her. This is a misunderstanding." "Call her," I said. "But she knows what she did. She admitted it to my face. She gave me an ultimatum, Michael. Sign over the house or she'd have me declared incompetent and take it anyway." He was dialing, holding the phone to his ear. It rang and rang. No answer. He tried again. Still no answer. On the 3rd try, it went straight to voicemail. She'd turned off her phone or blocked his number. "This is insane," he said, running his hand through his hair. "Mama, you can't just kick my wife out of the house. We're married. We live here." "You live here because I let you," I said, and I hated how hard my voice sounded, but it needed to be said. "This is my house, Michael. Your father and I bought it. We paid for it. It's in my name. Amber has no claim to it, and neither do you." "So what? You're kicking me out too." His voice was rising, anger overtaking confusion. "I'm your son. I've lived here my whole life except for when we were in the apartment. You're just going to throw me out?" "No," I said quietly. "You can stay, but she can't come back. Not to live, not to visit. Not until she apologizes and accepts that this is my house and my decision. Who lives in it? That's not fair. You're making me choose between you and my wife." "No, honey. She made you choose when she tried to take my house. I'm just asking you to see what she's been doing. To see how she's been treating me." He stared at me like I was a stranger. "She's been trying to help you. She cares about you. She worries about you living here alone, about you getting older and not being able to manage things. She's been trying to make things easier for you. And there it was. The script Amber had been feeding him for 2 years. The narrative she'd constructed where she was the concerned daughter-in-law and I was the declining, confused old woman who needed managing. "Michael," I said, sitting back down because my legs were shaking, "has it ever occurred to you that I was fine before she got here? That I managed this house for 15 years after your daddy died, without any help? That I worked, paid my bills, maintained my property, and lived my life without being confused or forgetful?" He hesitated. I could see the doubt creeping in. "All those times she said I forgot conversations or misplaced things. Did you actually see me do those things? Or did she just tell you I did?" She showed me things. Documents you'd left out. Bills you'd forgotten to pay. Documents she moved to make it look like I'd left them out," I said. "Bills she intercepted before I could pay them. Michael, she's been gaslighting me, making me look incompetent so she could justify taking over. And it worked. She had you convinced your own mother was losing her mind." He sank down onto the couch, his phone still in his hand. "I need to talk to her. I need to hear her side of this." "You do that," I said. "But while you're at it, ask her about the lawyer she's been consulting with. Ask her about the documents she had spread out on the kitchen table today, the ones about establishing a claim to this property. Ask her about trying to add herself to my bank accounts after I specifically told her no. She said that was just in case of emergency. It was fraud, Michael. The bank flagged it as fraud. I'm filing a formal report tomorrow." His face paled. "You're reporting her to the police." "I'm reporting the crime to the bank, and they'll determine if it needs to go to the police. I don't want to hurt her, honey, but I'm not going to let her steal my house either." We sat in silence for a long moment. I could hear the kitchen clock ticking, the same clock that had been there for 30 years. I could hear the air conditioner humming, the sound of a car passing on the street outside, all the familiar sounds of home. "I can't stay here if she can't," Michael finally said, and my heart broke. "She's my wife. I made vows." "I understand," I said, even though it killed me. "You're a grown man. You make your own choices. But understand this. I made vows too. To your father. To myself. I promised I'd protect what we built. This house is more than just property to me, Michael. It's my history. It's my security. It's proof that your daddy and I made something that lasted. And I won't let anyone take that from me, no matter who they are." He stood up, grabbed his briefcase. "I need some time to think. I'm going to get a hotel room tonight. I'll come back for my things tomorrow." "Michael," I started, but he was already walking toward the door. He paused with his hand on the doorknob, his back to me. "I thought you'd be happy for me, Mama. I thought you'd want me to have a life, a wife, a future. But you can't let go. You can't accept that I'm not your little boy anymore." "This isn't about me letting go," I said, tears streaming down my face now. "This is about her trying to take what's mine. Can't you see the difference?" But he was already gone, the door closing softly behind him. I sat in that living room, in my dead husband's chair, in the house we'd built together, and I cried like I hadn't cried since Robert's funeral, because I'd just lost my son. Maybe not forever, but for now, I'd lost him. That night was the longest of my life. I barely slept, kept hearing noises that weren't there, kept expecting Michael to come back, or Amber, or the police. My mind kept playing out worst-case scenarios. What if Michael sided with Amber completely? What if they really did try to have me declared incompetent? What if I'd just destroyed my relationship with my only child over a house? But every time those doubts crept in, I remembered Amber's face when she'd given me that ultimatum, the cold calculation in her eyes, the way she'd talked about me like I was already gone, already irrelevant. "You're the past," she'd said, and I knew I'd made the right choice. Because if I'd given in, if I'd signed over my house or let them control my finances, I'd have nothing. No security, no independence, no dignity. I'd be completely at their mercy. At 3 in the morning, I got up and made myself a cup of tea. I sat at the kitchen table and looked around at my kitchen. My kitchen, not Amber's. The avocado green appliances were gone, replaced by her stainless steel ones. The layout was different from how I'd had it. My cast iron skillets were gone. My dishes were boxed up in the garage. But it was still my house. The bones of it were still mine. I started making a list of everything I needed to do. Not just the legal stuff with the bank and the lawyer, but the personal stuff. I needed to change the locks. Davis had mentioned that. Said it was within my rights as the property owner. I needed to document everything. Write down exactly what had happened, in case there were legal proceedings. I needed to contact my doctor and get a cognitive evaluation. Something that would prove I was of sound mind if Amber and Michael did try to challenge my competency. And I needed to prepare for the possibility that Michael might never forgive me. That thought hurt worse than anything else, but I had to face it. I'd raised him to be loyal, and he was loyal to his wife. Maybe that would change when he saw what she really was. Or maybe it wouldn't. Maybe he'd chosen his path, and I'd chosen mine, and those paths were diverging now. By the time the sun came up, I had a plan, a detailed, step-by-step plan for protecting myself and my property. I'd learned from watching Amber operate for 2 years. She'd been methodical, strategic, patient. Well, I could be those things too. And I had something she didn't have. I was fighting for what was already mine, not trying to take what belonged to someone else. The law was on my side. I just had to use it. At 9 o'clock sharp, I walked into the Heritage Bank on Mary Street. Monica from the fraud department was waiting for me, along with the branch manager, a man named Keith Patterson, who'd been working there since before Michael started. "Mrs. Thompson," Keith said, shaking my hand. "I was very sorry to hear about this situation. We take fraud very seriously here." They led me to a private office, and for the next 2 hours we went through everything. Every transaction on my accounts for the past 2 years. Every document on file with my signature. They showed me the request to add Amber as a secondary account holder that had been flagged. The signature was close to mine, but not quite right. The pressure was different. The loop on my Y was too round. Their system had caught it, thank God. But there were other things that worried me more. 3 checks had been cashed from my account in the past year that I didn't remember writing. They were made out to cash and signed with my name, but the handwriting was slightly off on those, too. The amounts weren't huge. $200, $300, $400. Small enough that I hadn't noticed the missing. But together, they added up to $900. "I didn't write these," I said, looking at the photocopies. She must have taken them from my checkbook and practiced my signature. Monica was taking notes, documenting everything. "Mrs. Thompson, based on what we're seeing here, I strongly recommend you file a police report. This is clearly fraud, and we'll support that with our evidence." "My daughter-in-law did this," I said quietly. "If I file a police report, she could be arrested, charged with a crime." "Yes, ma'am," Keith said gently. "She could, but she committed a crime. She forged your signature and stole from you. That's not something to take lightly." I thought about Michael, about how a criminal charge against Amber would affect him, his job at the bank, his life. But then I thought about what Davis had said. She's counting on you not pressing charges. She's counting on you caring more about Michael's feelings than about what she did to you. That's how people like her operate. "File the report," I said. "I'll talk to the police." They set me up with new account numbers, new checks, new debit cards. They put fraud alerts on everything and required verbal password verification for any changes to my accounts. They made copies of all the forged documents for the police. And then Monica walked me down the street to the Waycross Police Department, where I filed a formal report for fraud and forgery. The officer who took my statement was a young woman named Officer Sarah Chen. She was patient and thorough, asking me to tell her everything from the beginning. I told her about Amber moving in, about the systematic way she'd undermined me, About the forged signatures and the stolen checks. About the threats to take my house. Ma'am, Officer Chen said when I was finished, what you're describing is financial elder abuse. That's a serious crime in Georgia. We're going to investigate this, and if we find sufficient evidence, we'll be filing charges. My son is married to her, I said. This is going to destroy our relationship. I understand that's difficult, she said sympathetically. But you have the right to be safe in your own home, to have control over your own finances. Your age doesn't make you less entitled to those rights. If anything, the law is specifically designed to protect seniors from this kind of exploitation. After I left the police station, I felt both lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because I'd taken action. I'd stood up for myself. I'd refused to be a victim. Heavier because I knew this was really happening now. There was no going back. Amber would be investigated, possibly charged. Michael would have to know. Our family might never recover. I stopped by the hardware store on the way home and bought new locks for all the doors. The man at the counter, Jimmy Davis, whose son had been in Little League with Michael, helped me pick out good ones and threw in installation for free when I told him what was going on. News travels fast in a small town. Evie Thompson, he said, shaking his head. I can't believe someone would do that to you. You've been nothing but kind to everybody in this town for 40 years. Well, I said, managing a smile. Turns out kindness isn't always enough. Don't you let this make you bitter, he said, patting my hand with his work-rough one. You're one of the good ones. This town knows that. That afternoon, while Jimmy was installing the new locks, Michael called. I let it go to voicemail the first time, but he called again immediately. Mama, what did you do? He said when I answered. The police just called me asking questions about Amber. They said you filed a report for fraud? I did, I said, watching Jimmy work on the deadbolt. Because she committed fraud. She forged my signature and stole money from my account. That's not... She wouldn't... He was doing that thing again. That automatic defense of her without even listening to the facts. Michael, the bank has the evidence. The forged signatures on checks and documents. $900 in checks I never wrote. They showed me everything. There was a long silence. $900? Mama, are you sure you didn't just forget writing those checks? And there it was. Even now, even with bank evidence, he was still willing to believe I was the one who was confused. Amber had done her job well. The bank's signature analysis showed they were forgeries, I said calmly. Not mistakes. Not me forgetting. Forgeries. Deliberate fraud. Another silence. Then his voice smaller. Did you have to involve the police? Couldn't we have handled this as a family? Amber stopped being family the moment she tried to steal from me, I said. And I'm not going to let her get away with it just because it's uncomfortable for you. She's my wife, Mama. My wife. I know, honey. And I'm sorry. I really am. But she committed crimes against me, and I have the right to report that. The law doesn't care if the criminal is family. You're going to ruin her life. You know that, right? If she's charged with fraud, she could lose her job at the bank. She could go to jail. Her whole future could be destroyed. She tried to ruin my life, I said, and I heard the shaking in my own voice. She tried to take my house, my savings, my independence. She was going to have me declared incompetent and lock me in a nursing home so she could have what your daddy and I built. Don't talk to me about ruining lives, Michael. She started this. I need to go. He hung up without saying goodbye. Jimmy had finished with the locks by then. He handed me the new keys, 3 copies of each. Changed all 3 doors, he said. Front, back, and the door from the garage into the house. Nobody's getting in here without your permission now. After he left, I walked through the house, locking and unlocking each door, testing them. They worked smoothly, solidly. No one had keys but me now. Not Michael, not Amber. Just me. My house, my locks, my keys. I should have felt safe, triumphant even. But all I felt was alone. The next few days were a blur of activity. Davis helped me draft and send a formal letter to both Michael and Amber, notifying them that their tenancy was terminated and that any remaining belongings needed to be removed from the property within 60 days. He also included a cease and desist, warning Amber not to contact me or come to the property, except for the supervised removal of her belongings. I got a call from the detective assigned to Amber's case, Detective Martinez, a middle-aged man with a kind voice who'd been with the Waycross PD for 20 years. He came to the house to take an official statement and to photograph the changes Amber had made, the painted shutters, the removed rose bushes, the rearranged furniture, all of it to document her systematic takeover of my property. "Mrs. Thompson," Detective Martinez said as he was leaving, "I want you to know that what happened to you is unfortunately common. Financial exploitation of seniors is one of the fastest-growing crimes in the country, but most victims never report it, especially when the perpetrator is family. You did the right thing coming forward." "I don't feel like I did the right thing," I admitted. "I feel like I destroyed my family." "Your daughter-in-law destroyed your family when she decided to commit crimes against you," he said firmly. "You're just holding her accountable. Those are two different things." I also made an appointment with my doctor, Dr. Ellen Brewster, who I'd been seeing for 15 years. I told her everything that had happened and asked if she could evaluate my cognitive function. She ran me through a series of tests, memory tests, problem-solving exercises, comprehension questions. At the end of it, she looked at me over her glasses and smiled. "Evelyn, your cognitive function is completely normal for your age. Better than normal, actually. Your memory is sharp, your reasoning skills are intact, and you show no signs of dementia or cognitive decline. If anyone tries to claim otherwise, you tell them to call me. I'll testify to your competency, if needed." "Thank you," I said, feeling tears prick my eyes. I needed to hear that. She had me doubting myself. "That's what gaslighting does," Dr. Brewster said. "It makes you question your own reality. But you're not crazy, Evelyn. You're not declining. You're a sharp, capable woman who was being systematically abused, and I'm proud of you for fighting back." I left her office with documentation of my cognitive evaluation, another piece of armor in my defensive arsenal. If Amber and Michael tried to claim I was incompetent, I had medical proof that I wasn't. Michael came by a week after I'd changed the locks to collect his things. I'd agreed to let him in, supervised, to pack up his belongings. Amber wasn't with him. The cease and desist prevented that, and she probably didn't want to face me anyway. He looked terrible, like he hadn't been sleeping. His eyes were red-rimmed and he'd lost weight. It hurt my heart to see him like that, but I couldn't fix it. This was his journey now. He had to figure out who his wife really was. "Hey, Mama," he said quietly when I opened the door with my new key. "Hey, baby." I stepped back to let him in. "I'll stay out of your way while you pack." "I want to talk first," he said. "Please?" We sat in the living room, him on the couch, me in Robert's chair. The same spots where we'd had so many conversations over the years. When he was a kid coming to me with problems. When he was a teenager asking for advice about girls. When he was a young man telling me about his dreams for the future. "The police are charging Amber," he said without preamble. "Felony fraud and forgery. Her lawyer says she could get up to 5 years if convicted." "I know," I said. "Detective Martinez called me. Is this what you wanted?" His voice cracked. "To put my wife in prison? No, Michael. I wanted her to leave my house and never come back. The law's handling the criminal part. That's not on me." "She says you're lying. That she never forged anything. That you're confused and vindictive because you don't like her. The bank has the evidence," I said. "The forged signatures. The stolen checks. This isn't he said, she said, honey. There's proof." He put his head in his hands. "I don't know what to believe anymore. She's my wife, I love her. But the evidence, I can't ignore the evidence." "Then don't," I said gently. "Look at the facts, Michael. Really look at them. Not at what she says or what you want to believe, but at what actually happened." "I've been thinking about these past 2 years," he said, looking up at me. About all the changes. About how different things got after we moved in here. And I realized, I don't think I've really talked to you, like, really talked, since we moved in. It was always surface stuff, brief conversations. I was always rushing off to do something with Amber. She kept you busy, I said. She isolated me, he corrected. From you, from my friends, from everyone but her. I didn't see it at the time, but I see it now. And the things she said about you being forgetful and confused. I believed her because I trusted her. But Mama, I've been going through my own memories, and I can't actually think of a single time I personally witnessed you being confused. Every example I have was Amber telling me about something you supposedly did. She's very good at what she does, I said. She's probably been doing it her whole life. I'm so sorry. His voice broke, and he started crying. My 43-year-old son, sitting on my couch, crying like he was a little boy again. I let her treat you like that. I watched her take over your house, push you out of your own space, and I didn't stop it. I didn't protect you. I'm so sorry, Mama. I went to him, sat next to him on the couch, and held him while he cried, just like I'd done when he was small, and the world hurt him. It's okay, baby. You were being manipulated, too. She's good at making people believe what she wants them to believe. I still love her, he said miserably. How messed up is that? After everything she's done, I still love her. Love doesn't turn off like a light switch, I said, stroking his hair like I used to when he was little. You're going to have to figure out what that means for you and your marriage. But Michael, you need to understand something. Whether you stay with her or not, she can never live in this house again. She can never have access to my finances or my property. That boundary is non-negotiable. I know, he said. I'm moving into an apartment. Amber's staying with a friend from work right now. I don't know what we're doing. I told her I needed space to think. That's wise, I said. Can I still see you? He asked, pulling back to look at me. Can things be okay between us, even if I'm still with her? You're my son. You'll always be my son. Nothing she did changes that. I cupped his face in my hands, looking at the man he'd become. But I need you to promise me something. Promise me you won't give her information about me. Not about my health. Not about my finances. Nothing. She's proven she'll use any information against me. I promise. He hugged me tight. I promise, Mama. I won't let her hurt you again. Over the next month, things settled into a new normal. Michael got an apartment in Brunswick, closer to the bank where he worked. He came by for dinner once a week, and we talked, really talked, for the first time in years. He told me about his marriage, about how he was starting to see all the ways Amber had controlled him, the way she criticized his clothes, his friends, his hobbies, the way she always had to be the center of attention, the way she kept score of every little thing and used it as ammunition in arguments. I thought she was trying to make me better, he admitted over one of those dinners, but she was just trying to make me into what she wanted, and what she wanted was someone she could control. He was seeing a therapist, trying to work through everything. He hadn't made a decision about his marriage yet. Amber was fighting the charges, claiming I was senile and vindictive, and he was waiting to see how the legal case played out. I didn't push him. He needed to come to his own conclusions. The criminal case against Amber moved slowly. Detective Martinez told me that was normal. These things took time. They were building a solid case, getting all the evidence together, working with the bank's fraud investigators. Amber had hired an expensive lawyer from Atlanta, and he was trying to get the charges dismissed, claiming there was no intent to defraud, that any signature discrepancies were innocent mistakes. But the prosecutor felt confident. They had a strong case, $900 in forged checks, and attempted unauthorized access to my bank accounts, documented evidence of a systematic pattern of behavior designed to undermine my autonomy and control my property. Plus, I'd been evaluated by my doctor and found to be completely competent, which destroyed Amber's confused elderly woman defense. I spent my days reclaiming my house, I brought my dishes back in from the garage and donated Amber's stark white plates to Goodwill, exactly what she'd done with my things. I bought new cast-iron skillets and seasoned them carefully, teaching myself again how to care for them, the way Mama had taught me. I rearranged the furniture back to where I'd had it, with Robert's chair in its rightful spot. I planted new roses in the front yard, choosing varieties similar to the ones Amber had destroyed. The Peace Rose for Robert, the Mr. Lincoln for Michael's birth, the Double Delight for surviving loss, and a new one, a Don Juan climbing rose with deep red blooms that I planted by the front porch, for me, for surviving, for reclaiming what was mine. My church family rallied around me when word got out about what had happened. Meals appeared on my doorstep. Friends stopped by to sit with me, to make sure I wasn't alone. Martha from next door came over every Sunday afternoon for coffee and conversation. The women in my Sunday school class told me I was brave, an inspiration. Some of them admitted they'd been in similar situations with their own family members and had never stood up for themselves. "You showed us it's okay to fight back," one of them said. "You showed us that being older doesn't mean we have to let people walk all over us." I hadn't meant to become some kind of symbol. I'd just been protecting what was mine. But if my story could help other women understand they had rights, that they didn't have to accept abuse from family members just because of their age, then maybe something good could come from all this pain. The trial was set for January of 2023. As the date approached, I got more and more nervous. I'd have to testify. I'd have to sit in a courtroom and tell strangers about how my daughter-in-law had abused me, manipulated my son, tried to steal my house. The prosecutor, a sharp young woman named Jennifer Walsh, met with me several times to prepare. "Mrs. Thompson, the defense is going to try to paint you as a bitter mother-in-law who couldn't accept her son getting married," she warned me. "They're going to suggest you were vindictive, that you made false accusations because you didn't like your daughter-in-law. You need to be ready for that." "I can handle it," I said, though I wasn't sure I could. "They may also try to question your memory, your cognitive function, despite your doctor's evaluation. They'll point to your age, suggest you're confused about events. Don't let them rattle you. Stick to the facts. Let the evidence speak for itself." The night before the trial, Michael came over. We sat on the front porch watching the sun set over the neighborhood, just like we used to when he was a boy. "I'm testifying tomorrow," he said, "for the prosecution." I looked at him in surprise. "You are?" "I told Jennifer Walsh everything about how Amber talked about you, about the conversations I overheard about taking the house, about how she isolated me from you. It's not easy, testifying against my own wife, but it's the right thing to do." "She's still your wife?" I asked gently. "For now. I haven't filed for divorce yet. I keep hoping. I don't know what I'm hoping. That this is all a bad dream? That she'll somehow not be the person all the evidence says she is?" He laughed bitterly. "I sound pathetic." "You sound human," I said. "You loved her. That doesn't just go away." "She used me," he said. "Used me to get to you, to get to this house. I've been going over everything in my head, and I don't think she ever really loved me. I think she saw a single guy with a stable job and a mother who owned a house outright, and she saw an opportunity. Everything after that was just playing a role." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe she did care about you at first and then greed took over. I don't know, honey. I don't think we'll ever really know what was in her heart. I know I loved her. I thought I was building a life with her. And it was all nothing, built on lies." We sat in silence for a while, listening to the cicadas starting their evening song. Finally, Michael said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For fighting back, for not letting her win. If you'd given in, if you'd signed over the house or let her take control, I might never have seen what she really was. I'd have gone on thinking she was this perfect woman who was just trying to help. And eventually she'd have convinced me to put you in a home, and we'd have sold this house, and you'd have lost everything. You saved yourself, But in a way, you saved me too. I reached over and took his hand. That's what mothers do, baby. We fight for our children, even when they don't know they need fighting for. The trial lasted 3 days. I testified on the first day, walking through everything that had happened. The prosecutor had me methodically explain how Amber had moved in, how she'd gradually taken over my house, how she'd undermined my competency, how she'd forged my signature and stolen money from my accounts. The jury, 8 women and 4 men, ages ranging from about 30 to 70, listened intently. When it was the defense attorney's turn to cross-examine me, he came at me hard, just like Jennifer had warned. Mrs. Thompson, isn't it true that you never liked Amber from the moment she started dating your son? That's not true, I said calmly. I wanted Michael to be happy. I welcomed her into our family. But you felt threatened by her, didn't you? Threatened that she was taking your son away from you. I felt pushed out of my own home, I corrected. There's a difference. You've admitted you're 66 years old. Isn't it possible that you simply forgot writing those checks? That you forgot giving permission for changes to your bank accounts? No. The bank's forensic analysis showed the signatures were forgeries, not my actual signature. And I never gave permission for changes to my accounts. I specifically denied that permission. Mrs. Thompson, your son lived in that house for over 40 years. Doesn't he have some right to the property? No, the house is in my name. It was paid for by my husband and me. Michael is my son, and I love him, but he doesn't own the house. On and on it went, the defense trying to make me look senile, vindictive, unreasonable. But I kept my composure. I stuck to the facts, and I could see from the jurors' faces that they weren't buying what Amber's lawyer was selling. On the second day, Michael testified. I watched him walk to the stand, sworn in, and then tell the truth about his wife, about the conversations he'd overheard, about how she'd talked about me, about the legal documents he'd seen her with, about her attempts to add herself to my accounts without permission. Amber's lawyer tried to discredit him, too, suggesting he was angry at his wife for some unrelated reason, that he was siding with his mother unfairly. But Michael held firm. I love my wife, he said, but I love the truth more. And the truth is that she tried to steal from my mother. She used me to do it, and I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life. But I won't lie to protect her. My mother taught me better than that. The bank representatives testified, showing the forensic evidence of the forged signatures. Dr. Brewster testified about my cognitive evaluation, firmly stating that I was completely competent and showed no signs of decline. Detective Martinez walked through the investigation, showing the pattern of behavior, the systematic takeover. On the 3rd day, Amber took the stand in her own defense. She was polished, put together, wearing a conservative navy suit and minimal makeup. She cried when she talked about how much she'd tried to help me, how she'd just been worried about an elderly woman living alone. I never meant any harm, she said, tears streaming down her face. I was trying to make things easier for Evelyn. She seemed confused, forgetful. I thought I was helping. Michael and I both wanted to take care of her. But on cross-examination, Jennifer Walsh destroyed her. Ms. Sutton, if you were so concerned about Mrs. Thompson's well-being, why didn't you suggest she see a doctor for a cognitive evaluation? I didn't want to upset her. But you had no problem telling her son that she was declining? No problem undermining her confidence in herself? No problem taking over her house and her life? It wasn't like that. You testified that you were just trying to help. But isn't it true that you were consulting with attorneys about how to take ownership of Mrs. Thompson's house? I was exploring options for the future. Options that involved you and your husband owning the house while Mrs. Thompson was still alive and competent. Amber didn't have a good answer for that, or for the questions about the forged checks, or for the attempts to access my bank accounts. After being told no, the more Jennifer pressed, the more Amber's story fell apart. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they came back, the forewoman stood and read the verdict. On the charge of felony fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of forgery, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of financial exploitation of an elder, we find the defendant guilty. Guilty. On all counts. Amber's face went white, then red. She started crying, real tears this time, not the manipulative ones she'd used on the stand. Her expensive lawyer put his hand on her arm, leaning in to whisper something to her. But it was over. She'd been convicted. Sentencing was set for 6 weeks later. Jennifer told me that Amber would likely get probation and restitution on a first offense. Maybe some jail time, but probably not the maximum. I didn't care about revenge. I just cared that she'd been held accountable, that the law had said, officially, that what she did was wrong. After the verdict, Michael and I sat in my car in the courthouse parking lot. He'd watched the whole trial, seen his wife convicted of crimes against his mother. His face was pale, drawn. He looked 10 years older than he had 3 months ago. I should have seen it, he said. All the signs were there. I should have protected you. You were being manipulated too, I reminded him. She's very good at what she does. That's not an excuse. He turned to me, and I saw tears in his eyes. Mama, I'm so sorry. For everything. For bringing her into your life. For letting her treat you that way. For choosing her over you. I'm sorry. I forgive you, I said simply. You're my son. I love you. And we're going to be okay. I'm filing for divorce, he said. I already talked to a lawyer. I can't be married to someone who would do that to you. To anyone. It's over. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. Because even though Amber had shown her true colors, Michael had still lost something. He'd lost the life he thought he was building. He'd lost the woman he thought he'd married. He'd have to start over, in his mid-40s, alone. Don't be sorry, he said. You saved me from making an even bigger mistake. What if we'd had kids? What if I'd let her have power of attorney over you? What if... He stopped, overwhelmed by all the what-ifs. But you didn't, I said firmly. You saw the truth eventually. You did the right thing. And now, we move forward. Amber was sentenced in March of 2023. She got 3 years probation, 500 hours of community service, and was ordered to pay me restitution for the stolen money plus damages. She was also banned from ever contacting me again. If she violated probation, she'd serve 2 years in prison. She lost her job at the bank, of course. Couldn't work in finance with a fraud conviction. Last I heard, she'd moved back to Atlanta and was working retail. Michael's divorce was finalized in May. He didn't contest anything, just wanted it over. They'd never combined finances, thank God, and they had no children, so it was relatively straightforward. He walked away from the marriage with nothing but the clothes on his back and a hard lesson learned. By summer of 2023, life had settled into something resembling normal. Michael came for dinner every Sunday, and we'd sit on the front porch afterward, talking about everything and nothing. He'd started dating again, cautiously, with his eyes wide open this time. He was in therapy, working through trust issues, and learning to recognize manipulation. I had my house back, my routines, my space, my peace. I'd painted the master bedroom, putting my own stamp on it, reclaiming it from Amber's brief occupation. I'd hung pictures of Robert everywhere, in the living room, the bedroom, the hallway, reminding myself and anyone who entered that this was Robert's and my house, our legacy, our proof that we'd made something that lasted. My church friends celebrated with me, proud of how I'd stood up for myself. I'd gotten calls from other women in town who'd heard my story, asking for advice about their own situations with manipulative family members. I'd never wanted to be an advocate, but I'd become one anyway. And if I could help even one woman protect herself, then everything I'd been through was worth it. The roses in my front yard bloomed that June. Beautiful, fragrant, full of life. The Don Juan climbing rose had taken to the trellis beautifully, covering the front porch with deep red blooms. Every morning I'd sit on that porch with my coffee, looking at those roses, feeling Robert's presence in the house he'd worked so hard to give me. "We did it, Bobby," I'd whisper to the wind. "We protected what we built." She didn't win. Looking back now, I understand so much more about what happened. Amber was a predator. She'd looked for someone vulnerable. Not me, but Michael, a single man in his late 30s, still living with his mother, desperate for love and companionship. She'd targeted him, reeled him in, and then used him to get to the real prize, my house. She'd counted on my age, making me an easy target. She'd assumed that a 66-year-old widow would be easy to gaslight, easy to manipulate, easy to push aside. She'd underestimated me. She'd seen the gray hair and the modest clothes and the small-town life, and she'd thought I was weak. But strength isn't about youth or appearances. It's about knowing who you are and what's yours and being willing to fight for it. It's about saying no when everything in you wants to give in just to keep the peace. It's about standing alone if you have to, even when it costs you everything. I learned that I was stronger than I thought, that I could stand up to someone younger, slicker, more polished, that I could navigate the legal system, file police reports, testify in court, that I could hold firm to my boundaries even when my own son was caught in the middle. I learned that love sometimes means letting go, letting Michael make his own mistakes and learn his own lessons, even when it broke my heart to watch. And I learned that home isn't just a building or an address. It's the accumulation of a lifetime, the memories in the walls, the history in the floorboards, the love that built it and sustained it. It's proof that you lived, that you mattered, that you created something lasting, and nobody has the right to take that from you, no matter who they are or what they claim. The house on Gilmore Street is still mine. I'm 67 now, and I plan to live here until the day I die. When that day comes, hopefully many years from now, Michael will inherit it. Not because he is entitled to it, but because I choose to give it to him. Because he learned his lesson. Because he chose truth over convenience. Because he's my son, and I love him. And this house represents everything his father and I wanted to give him. Security, stability, a foundation to build his own life on. But until then, it's mine. Every room, every memory, every rosebush, mine. And I fought for it. I stood my ground. I refused to be erased. And you know what? It was worth it. Every difficult conversation, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt. It was all worth it to still be here, in my home, on my terms. Because I'm Evelyn May Thompson, and I'm not going anywhere. I want to say something to anyone listening to this who might be in a similar situation. Maybe you're being pressured by family to give up control of your finances or your property. Maybe someone is telling you you're too old to manage your own affairs. Maybe you're being slowly pushed out of your own life by someone who claims to be helping. Listen to me. You have rights. You have power. You have the law on your side. Your age doesn't make you less entitled to those rights. If anything, there are protections specifically designed to help seniors who are being exploited. Don't let anyone make you feel crazy for standing up for yourself. Don't let guilt or family pressure make you give up what's yours. Don't sacrifice your security and independence just to keep the peace. The peace you'd be keeping would be false anyway, built on you giving up everything that matters while someone else benefits. It's not easy. Lord knows, it's not easy. You might lose relationships. You might face backlash. You might have to make hard choices that hurt people you love. But you know what's harder? Living with the consequences of not standing up for yourself, being homeless or powerless or completely at someone else's mercy in your own golden years. Knowing you let someone steal what you and your spouse worked your whole lives to build. Get help if you need it. Talk to a lawyer. Talk to your doctor. File police reports if crimes have been committed. Document everything. Know your rights, and then use them. Stand firm. Hold your ground. Because you matter. Your life matters. Your home matters. Your dignity matters. And nobody, not your children, not their spouses, not anyone, has the right to take those things from you. It's never too late to fight back. I was 66 years old when I stood up to Amber. 66, and I won. Not because I was young or strong or had unlimited resources, but because I knew I was right. I had the law on my side, and I refused to give up. If I can do it, so can you. Now, before I let you go, I want to ask one more favor. If this story resonated with you, if it helped you in any way, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment telling me your story. I read every single one, and I want to know I'm not alone in this. We grandmas, we've lived long enough to have some wisdom to share. We've survived things that would break other people, and our stories matter. Thank you for listening to mine. Thank you for being here with me through every twist and turn. Thank you for understanding that this wasn't about being vindictive or unforgiving. It was about survival. It was about dignity. It was about protecting what was mine. And to Michael, if you ever listen to this, I love you, son. I always have, and I always will. What happened with Amber doesn't change that. You're a good man who made some mistakes, but you learned from them. You did the right thing in the end, and I'm proud of you for that. This house will be yours someday, but for now, it's mine, and that's how it should be. To everyone else, stand up for yourselves. Know your worth. Protect what's yours. And remember, it's never too late to take control of your own life. God bless you all. This is Evelyn Mae Thompson, signing off from Waycross, Georgia, where the roses are blooming, and I'm still standing strong. Thank you, and goodbye.